Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Eichhoff, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Alumni Operations at John Carroll University. Thank you for joining us this evening for our next installment of A.C.E.S, the Alumni Continuing Education Series. A.C.E.S was established in the spring of 2013 by the Office of Alumni Relations in the spirit of lifelong learning. The program offers enrichment opportunities for alumni and friends through the expertise of members of the JCU administration, faculty, and alumni community. Over the past year, we have heard from experts on ethics and leadership, racial equity and social justice, disruptive technology, neurodevelopment, communication and marketing, and the financial life cycle, just to name a few. Tonight, we will explore what the future holds for our cities in a post-COVID environment. Before I introduce our featured moderator, I want to share a few housekeeping items. First, we encourage you to view the program in full screen mode. Additionally, please ensure that you stay muted throughout the duration of the program. Following the discussion, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. Please utilize the chat feature for your questions, and I will curate them and then ask them to our panelists at the conclusion of their presentation. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Andy Welki. Andy Welki received a BA in economics from Wilkes College and completed his PhD in economics from Penn State University. Since then, Dr. Welki has been a faculty member at John Carroll University within the Department of Economics and Finance in the Boller College of Business. Past administrative experiences include service as an assistant dean in the College of Arts and Sciences. He's an active researcher with publications in areas including sports economics, the choice of college major, and highway safety. Additionally, he has received awards for his teaching quality at the college level, the university level, and from external organizations. His university service includes more than 25 years as the faculty representative to the OAC, Ohio Athletic Conference, and the NCAA. Within the conference, he has held a number of leadership positions. Dr. Welki, thank you so much for joining us this evening. How are you doing? The floor is yours.
Hi, Eric. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have this event tonight. But really, this event is made possible by all of our participants that you will be hearing from over the course of this evening. Just to put it into some context, I'm currently teaching an urban econ class, and over the course of the semester, each one of the students that you'll hear from tonight has been engaged in a research program to some degree, looking at a city from the standpoint of where it was in 1970 to where it was in 2020. And so it was logical in a post-COVID mindset to take an opportunity to see what the future might look like for all of these cities. And so without spending too much time talking about that, what you'll hear tonight will be presentations on sort of 4 different parts of the country: the West, the South, the Midwest, and a collection of others. And I will be sort of hopefully moderating all of this technology stuff well. I'll do my best. And that said, we're going to see if we can get ourselves started by getting our PowerPoints up here. And I will just be rolling through them as the students transition with their conversations. We will start first with Mr. Connor Fenton, and he'll be telling us a little bit about Seattle.
Hey everyone, good evening. So the city that I've been doing research on over the semester has been Seattle. And what I've discovered is that from the 1970s up until today, it was very much a manufacturing headquarter in Seattle. Boeing had its headquarters there in the 1970s and has been rapidly transitioning into a more white collar workplace. We see that the home values in the actual Seattle area are almost $890,000, while the median home values of surrounding neighborhoods are about $300,000 to $730,000. So on the next slide, we can see what that impact is going to have for Seattle in the future. White collar workers who have the ability to leverage the remote workplace that COVID has brought about are going to move out of the city, while blue collar people who need to stay near their city workplaces and the low income who can't afford to move will stay, which is going to start shifting home values and have adverse impacts on educations, which is funded by property taxes.
Thanks, Connor. Next, we'll be moving on to Adam Shaw, who will be telling us a little bit about Sacramento.
Right, so Sacramento COVID, at this time, post-COVID, about 50 to 70% of people living in the city are working remotely. And this is causing a couple of things. One of those things is decreased congestion in the Sacramento city area, as well as decreased pollution because people aren't driving their cars to work. And this is increasing the quality of life of people living in the Sacramento area. Some essential industries in the city of Sacramento, one of them is the government. It has always been and will continue to be an essential industry in Sacramento, given that Sacramento
Give us a sound breakup. Not a problem. Why don't we, technology, gotta love it. We're going to transition next to San Francisco, Antonin.
So moving on to San Francisco, the city is very popular for being a hub in science and technologies jobs, especially in research and development, meaning that remote workers can still work from home and be efficient enough. It is thanks to the impact of the Silicon Valley. There is also a big housing crisis in the city, meaning that the prices are very expensive compared with the ones in the United States in general. The COVID is currently changing the layout of the city, especially in downtown where businesses have suffered a lot. So moving on to the next slide, remote workers want now to go to cheaper areas, but because of the housing crisis, it is impossible for them to do so, meaning there is a lot of abandoned housing in the city. About downtown businesses, they have suffered a lot, and there is new commuting patterns, meaning that nowadays the city streets have to be redesigned. So what's next for the city? It is going to be only a core of high tech with remote workers outside of the periphery and a big hole in downtown.
Thank you, Antonin. Our next speaker is Max Shoemaker. He'll be telling us a little bit about Mesa, Arizona.
All right, so the city I was assigned to cover was Mesa, Arizona, which is currently the 34th largest city in the United States, with a population of a little bit north of 500,000 estimated in 2021. And that makes it the third largest city in Arizona. And as you can look at the map, number one is Phoenix. So that might serve it pretty well in the future with population from Phoenix and Scottsdale moving over to Mesa, which is a much more family-oriented community. But in Mesa, there are a lot of high-value jobs throughout the aerospace, aviation, defense, and technology industry, which, as you may assume, haven't been affected too much by the pandemic. And so three factors I look to think that are going to be very important for Mesa post-COVID are its two airports, the current real estate market, and the neighboring communities. So with the two airports, Phoenix Mesa Gateway is an international commercial airport. So obviously the volume will be picking up more with the air traffic. And then when it goes back to their aerospace and aviation defense industries, Falcon Field has been seeing a lot of development. In 2020, there was a $65 million development, which has slowed down a little bit due to COVID, but will be picking back up, and it's renovating the infrastructure. And the current real estate market has been running pretty hot overall, but in Mesa, in January 2022, the prices were up 25.6% year over year. So that most likely is already population from Phoenix and Scottsdale kind of flowing into the area. And then the neighboring communities, if there's still people working in the area of Phoenix and Tempe, there's the public transportation already implemented with the Metro Light Rail, which was initiated in 2008. So they can definitely have good transportation to work and to home. Thank you.
Thank Max. Next, we'll be hearing about Albuquerque from Mr. Perello.
So looking at Albuquerque post-COVID, so New Mexico and all of Albuquerque has kind of struggled and they've lost a lot of population. Looking at Albuquerque, a lot of people started to migrate up north to the suburbs areas. And New Mexico had really strict lockdowns. So this led to 40% of small businesses shutting down. And the tourism industry, which is a huge part of Albuquerque, generating $2 billion in revenue and over 45,000 jobs, really started to struggle. So we saw a lot of effects on the economy there. So now looking at the recovery, so Albuquerque actually got a $110 million infrastructure bill. And so what they're going to use this to focus on is construction really, and using it to focus on tourism, such as the aquatic center, and also building out roads so that people will be able to travel into Albuquerque easier, making sure that people living up north will still be able to work in Albuquerque. And another big focus is focusing on STEM boomerang, which is keeping the people that graduate from the University of New Mexico in the city, rather than having them move up north with either their parents or move up north to the suburbs because it's a nicer area. So what they want to keep is keep those high tech individuals in the city to keep the economy strong. Thank you.
Thanks, Richie. Next, we'll be hearing about San Jose from Chandler Banky.
Hi, everyone. So I did my research on San Jose. It's 1.7 million population, and I looked at the unemployment rate to kind of show how it's rebounded nicely because it's a big tech hub. So as you can see, obviously in 1970, that rate was about 7 to 9%, and it stayed steady till about 2020, where it spiked up to 14.3. And then as you can see, it kind of slowly rebounded. And I think you can attribute it to being a big time tech hub. And other notes about it, the economy has steadily rebounded because of this. I think having the ability to conduct remote work has helped hugely, being that tech hub and venture capitalist home. And then in March 2022, the Bay Area added 22,500 jobs. And then Silicon Valley is huge for them. And then they recorded a record low 2.4 unemployment, and the hospitality and leisure sections are expected to make a full recovery.
Thanks. Fresno, Adrienne Schupp, please.
Hello, everyone. Today, I will touch on the city of Fresno, California, which is the 35th largest city in the U.S. Post-COVID economic recovery excelled in Fresno. Employment has bounced back, exceeding pre-pandemic levels in many job sectors, as is seen on the next slide, the top chart up there. Fresno has been deemed to have the second strongest economic recovery from the pandemic when compared to 49 other U.S. cities, as seen on the bottom list provided. So through this study, it is seen that mid-sized cities may economically recover better than larger cities. So it will be interesting to see moving forward if this allows mid-sized cities like Fresno to gain an enduring economic advantage over the larger cities that were slower to recovery. And then another area that will be greatly impacted moving forward will be the housing market. As remote work allows individuals more freedom over where they live, demand for comparably less expensive cities like Fresno continues to increase. So moving forward, we'll see if remote work remains a driving force for demand outpacing supply in certain cities. Current residents of Fresno are urging officials to make affordable housing a top concern, as they fear this inflow of people will only continue further straining the housing market in Fresno, California. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrienne. Our last West city will be Tucson, and that'll be Jack Samuelson.
All right, everyone. So yeah, I'll be talking about Tucson, Arizona. This city is obviously known for tourism. This is the largest industry that was affected by COVID-19. There's a loss in about $35 billion in 2020. So the committee of Visit Tucson created a vision for the future coming out of the pandemic. Goal 1 was to grow visitation. Goal 2 was to help the community recover fiscally and financially, or fiscally and medically. And then goal 3 was to reshape Visit Tucson, the committee's operation, in order to maximize the tourism industry once again. So that leads to the big question of, will there be a shutdown like COVID-19 again? Tucson and the whole state of Arizona actually passed a bill to limit the powers of the governor. So public health emergencies can no longer last for more than 30 days. So it's unlikely to see a situation like this affect tourism in Tucson again. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Let me get organized here with my next share. So next we'll be translating or transferring our focus to the southern region. Let me get to a screen share here. You guys did a great job flowing through. Our first conversation on the South should be about the city of Nashville from Sam Holt. Let me see if we can get this guy blown up full screen. Where'd we go? Slideshow. Lost you. There we go. You're the man, Sam.
All right, yeah, so we're kicking off the South with Nashville, Tennessee. So we've kind of seen the relationship between the city center and the residents severed post-COVID in a lot of cities, but Nashville has actually grown throughout this time. The downtown residential population is up 20% since the pandemic, with a lot of that influx coming from larger cities like New York, which were especially adversely impacted by the pandemic. Nashville is especially attractive because it's cheap due to the lack of a state income tax in Tennessee. So people looking for a nice tax haven moving from big cities have even more incentive to go there. Large companies are also drawn there as well because it's cheaper with the more lax tax laws in Tennessee. For example, Amazon is putting a large distribution center there, and new residential projects downtown are underway and still moving forward. So the city skyline will be looking very different in the new future. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Next in the queue will be the city of Atlanta, and this would be Megan Suderly.
Yeah, so I had the city of Atlanta, and the population has grown by over 60,000 people just due to people coming down here or down to Atlanta because of COVID. the city got $64,000 in COVID relief funds and kind of put that towards testing and other things like that. But unfortunately, over 80,000 people in Atlanta moved to lower income class. So there was a lot of increased poverty. And the pandemic ended up fast tracking economic and societal disparities. But the city of Atlanta is starting to open again with a lot of new investments in bioscience technology, supply chain, and manufacturing. And the most interesting one is they're actually investing a lot into the airport just because travel is starting to become more popular again. So they want to train new pilots and things like that.
Thanks, Megan. Christian Jackson will follow Megan, and he will be telling us a little bit about Oklahoma City.
All right, so I'll be talking about Oklahoma City. Some post-COVID expectations is that the average income is expected to increase because of the emerging tech industry in Oklahoma City. This could be due to many of their headquartered energy companies needing more technological workers. And it is especially due to the increased opportunities around the country for remote work. Housing prices are also expected to increase from the average of around 170,000 as the average housing for Oklahoma City, while the unemployment rate will continue to decline and recover as the pandemic has begun to subside. And then one main thing that they've done for economic recovery after COVID is that they've had 21 million in the city's fiscal recovery fund be used. And the reason for this was to help struggling small businesses, and the money will go to the Alliance for Economic Development, which will develop specific programs to increase job training, workforce development, upscaling minority small business support and technical assistance, and small businesses and nonprofit support programs.
Thanks, Christian. Next in the queue will be the city of Memphis, and this will be Stephen Lai.
All right, the city I'll be talking about today is Memphis, Tennessee, and I'll be speaking about the post-COVID trajectories. All right, starting off with businesses, the success of Memphis Grizzlies saw a 67.1% in tourist attraction. The unemployment rate decreased by 3%, and the major employers in Memphis are FedEx and AutoZone. Moving on to the real estate market, the median house prices have increased by 25.7%, and I found that home values increased by 20.7% during the pandemic. And lastly, I'll be speaking about remote working. So the city of Memphis recently surveyed about 20 unnamed businesses in the area, and the poll revealed that 16% want to continue working remote, 13% are willing to work both remotely and in person, and lastly, 72% will rather work in person only. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Miami on the horizon with Mr. Ulrich.
Hi, so Miami is a very desirable place to live. It's got a warm climate. It's right on the coastline, so lots of beaches, and everyone vacations there every year. So what happened with the pandemic was, as people were forced to either retire early or they were given freedom to choose where they were working remotely, a lot of people moved into Southern Florida and into Miami in particular. And as you can see from this graph here, the prices of housing skyrocketed over the past few years. And looking at this graph here, what this tells us is that Miami is the most expensive city to live in terms of home ownership costs as a percentage of median income. So the biggest takeaway from the pandemic is the rising cost of living in Miami.
Thank you, Andrew. Our next conversation will be about Fort Worth, Texas, and it's Anira Bohan.
So Fort Worth, Texas is the 12th largest city in the United States, and it has a current population of about 950,000 people. And so moving into the post-COVID world, the economy never really struggled too much during COVID just because of the diversified economy, which was an essential driver for recovery. And Fort Worth, Texas has one of the most diverse economies in the nation. And the recovery pre-pandemic is a lot quicker than the national level, with unemployment in December of 2021 being 3.6%, where the national average was above 5% during that time. There's a need for greater tourism because COVID reduced a lot of people traveling, which in turn caused the tourism industry to fail. And they had problems with hotel management, where a lot of hotels were debating shutting down until the pandemic restrictions were luckily lifted. And Fort Worth, Texas is known as a beautiful puzzle. So the financial services, airlines, infrastructure, and commercial real estate in recent months has really recovered. Airlines, especially because travel are picking up, and financial services never really hurt as badly during COVID. And finally, the trade, transportation, utilities, and professional services are starting to rebolster their work within Fort Worth, Texas, and come up with new ways of promoting the industry. Fort Worth is also dealing with a remote challenge where certain individuals want to move out of Fort Worth, Texas, while other individuals want to move in. So they're trying to face how remote work will work in their city.
Thanks, Anira. We're staying in the state of Texas, and next up will be Owen Hernan, and he'll be telling us about the Sun City.
Yeah, so as Dr. Welki mentioned, El Paso, Texas is nicknamed the Sun City for getting over 300 days of sunlight a year. So it's a very popular place for retirees to go. It is currently the 22nd largest city in the United States. So as the post-COVID outlook, the population has increased year over year since the pandemic started. And this has followed a 3-year decline prior to the pandemic. So it's caused by people forced to retire or leaving work.
You break down there, Owen. Looks like we got some Zoom issues. Let's see if we can move on.
Work early, looking for better weather overall.
My bad. You're fading in and out, Owen. Not your problem. How about we'll move on to Cam Ciceri telling us a little bit about Jacksonville.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Welki. So the city I was tasked with was the 13th largest city of Jacksonville, located in Florida. They were impacted pretty heavily by the pandemic. Downtown foot traffic, as you can see, dropped 44% during the early stage of the pandemic. Hospitality and leisure industry really hurt them, as tourism is very popular in the Jacksonville area. The unemployment rate at one point was 10.8%, rebounded to 3.2 as of January 22. And then they were able to recover about 92% of all lost jobs during the pandemic. And it is obviously a desirable place to leave. So surprisingly, during that early stage of the pandemic, people were still coming to the city. And then future outlook, as I mentioned before, future is very bright for Jacksonville, Florida. Many people are coming here, low state income taxes, beautiful weather, 90 to 95 people a day are moving to the area. And the retail market is showing incredible strength and is a very bright future for a lot of new businesses being able to move in and take advantage of regaining some normalcy within Jacksonville. Thank you, everyone.
Next up on the queue will be the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, with Mr. Brett Clough.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brett Clough, and like Dr. Welki said, I'll be providing some insight on Charlotte, North Carolina's emergence from the pandemic. So to begin, the Charlotte Observer conducted a survey in January to get an idea of where the workforce is actually working. Almost half of the respondents claimed to have the option to work in person or from home. And of those 43%, over 70% of the workers choose to work from home at some capacity. Almost a third of Charlotte's workforce is still entirely remote, however. And moving into housing, prices are up 25% year over year in Charlotte's Mecklenburg County, while its population is actually growing at a slower rate than its surrounding 8 counties. This is primarily indicative of their workforce, which is made up mainly of those in banking and other financial sectors, moving out of the city and into the cheaper, quieter, and ultimately safer suburbs. Given that they may only need to come into the office for client meetings, if at all, the outflow of financial professionals into the suburbs will likely continue. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Last will be Mr. Bricker Thiel, telling us a little bit about Raleigh, North Carolina.
Thank you. So yes, my city is Raleigh, North Carolina, and it is known as the City of Oaks. So going on to the next slide, you can see here that emerging from the pandemic, a huge thing is city health. And one thing that really helped with the city of Raleigh was that their COVID policies were relatively lax. This was really business friendly, and it helped keep a pretty low unemployment rate. At some points, it was 10 percentage points lower than the national average. On top of that, in terms of city health, is also the fact that Raleigh, North Carolina is one of the largest cities that actually has a balanced budget and oftentimes has a surplus. And so that is a really big thing for the city health. In terms of public health, they're part of the research triangle. And so that's really good for the medical industry. However, there are disparities in this, and there is as large as a 12-year difference in life expectancy between two parts of the city. Now, a huge thing they're doing to come out of the pandemic to fix that is with the education, and with the biggest thing being the magnet school locations, and it enables inner city youth to really attend better schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Bricker. So while I get sort of reorganized here, just as a programming update, what we'll try to do before we do our very last city of the presentation, which will be the city of Baltimore, I'm going to try to revisit to give Mr. Shaw a chance to tell us about Sacramento, and we'll try to give Owen a chance to tell us a little bit more about the Sun City. So thank you for your understanding in that particular space. Midwest, next on the plate. And we will start with Mr. Dever.
All right, hello everyone. So because Indianapolis is a Rust Belt city, they have had minimal growth since manufacturing plants began to leave the area in the 1970s. Therefore, they are beginning to transition the identity of their city. They're doing this through investment in the downtown area, mainly residential development. Elanco, a major pharmaceutical company, is moving downtown, which will create jobs for the economy. A Bottle Works project is designed to centralize commercial or consumer spending through a commercial business district. And the 16 Tech Innovation District is a tech hub that is designed to develop and incorporate new technology. Also, Indianapolis experiences a lot of their economic growth from tourism, mainly in their sporting events like the Indianapolis 500, Indiana Pacers, and Indianapolis Colts, as well as the NFL Combine. So as COVID restrictions are lifted, they will experience a lot more economic growth in the city.
We should be, let's do Denver. Should have been Kansas City, but we'll do Denver, and we'll see where Kansas City is in this mix.
Hello, everyone. My name's Kendall, and the city I studied was Denver, Colorado. And Denver's residents are 84.9% vaccinated, which is an important statistic to note because this has allowed for storefronts and restaurants to open back up, as well as the virtual work option to decrease.
Let me get organized here. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Kendall. These
okay.
Slides got out of mix.
No worries. Tourism is rebounding well and expects to make a full recovery, which is important because that is a huge part of the economic output in Denver, Colorado. The government created a GO bond of $260 million towards infrastructure projects and hopes to create 4,200 good paying jobs for the people who lost their employment during COVID-19. And they also hope that these infrastructure projects create around $550 million worth of economic output. The unemployment rate reached an all-time high of 13.4% back in May 2020, but has recovered well back to 3.8% as of March 2022. Thank you.
Thanks, Kendall. Kansas City should be next. Ali, is that you?
Yep. I'm glad at least my slide carried over.
There you
the
go.
Facts.
So
Not the background, unfortunately, but
we had pretty orange colors.
Yeah. Anyways, I looked at the Kansas City, and now some of this stuff is not on there because I had no space, but I can definitely sum up. So one thing I wanted to put on there, but I had no time to, was employment. So a lot overall, the unemployment rate, depending by race, has went up. Unemployment has went up for Black citizens, 6.7%. For whites, it's 5.7. For Latinos, around 5.6. Generally, it's lowered back down to normal, but African Americans are still in a very, very high rate in mind. And before, COVID, it was around 3. So it rose dramatically. Now, as for the current economy, there was an employment gain of 29,400 jobs total, mostly in the leisure and hospitality market. The rest is in government agencies. So total job increase has grown 4%, which is a good thing. It's good economic recovery. So there is a plan that the city has called Imagine Downtown Kansas City 2030. It envisions a more robust and connected downtown community. They have programs like giving short-term economic aid to those who haven't recovered from COVID job loss, and they hope to work on infrastructure plans, helping to improve affordability in housing as they were doing in the past, public infrastructure, because there's a lot of areas that they haven't had maintenance in a while. They to also help run down neighborhoods, especially those suffering from, well, terrible conditions. Some of them are painted with lead, which causes a lot of issues in developmental children, and also mobility. Now, one of the biggest things that the city is trying to do is to attract capital so that businesses can flow in the city, therefore making it easier. Sustainability is also another issue, as the city itself is very polluted, as there's a lot of oil in the state. So they want to help try to lower their input in the environment. Overall, that's their plan for the post-COVID era so far, and so far they've been getting back on track, but they still got a long way to go until then.
Thanks, Ali. Next up should be Omaha with Nico.
Hey guys, how are you at Omaha? You go to the next slide. So first of all, Omaha's economy was actually minimally affected by the pandemic, and all but one sector, the tourist industry. Omaha's economy is dependent on financial services. There's massive businesses there like Omaha Blue Cross Blue Shield, Berkshire Hathaway, and TD Ameritrade. These businesses were not really affected by the pandemic because they can easily do business online and their employees can work from home. But the issue with that is that those businesses brought tourists for the city. There's not really a reason to go to Omaha aside for work-related things like meetings because of the shift to work at home. I can see severe decline in the number of tourists that visit Omaha, maybe even the end of all the wonderful convention centers hotel that they have in the city. Secondly, I see future deterioration of public services as a result of the pandemic. Omaha received federal funding for COVID relief extremely late due to meddling from their governor and state legislator. This caused them to fire a significant amount of their public employees like police, firefighters, and construction workers. As a result of this, there have been many public complaints about the general deterioration of public parks, roads, and green spaces, and even an increase in property crime. Even to this day, Omaha has not been able to return to pre-pandemic employee levels due to the fact they've been forced to spend the majority of their funding on rent assistance and business assistance. In the future, I can see a future general deterioration of infrastructure in Omaha due to the fact they're forced to go deep in their pocketbook during COVID. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nico. So our last area should involve, let's see, what do we want here? Other. And this is a collection of cities from a variety of spaces. Let's see if we can get this guy organized. What do we want? Draw, no, link, no poem. Slideshow. Should be the city of Columbus on your screens, and we can imagine that this will be Eliza Clark sharing with us.
I don't see it on my screen. I'm not sure about anybody else.
Okay, let's try.
No, it's not there.
Okay, thanks for the heads up, guys. Let's try again here. What do we want? There now or no? I'll take it as no.
Yeah, it's not there, Andy.
Okay, not a problem. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Not a new slide. We don't want a new slide. We want copy cut, transition slideshow from beginning. Better?
Do you want me to bring it up on mine?
Dr. Okay, I don't think
it's not there. You need to share your screen again.
Okay, my bad. Thanks for the heads up, guys. Let's go back to share screen. Appreciate the help, guys. Share screen. We want other. Share screen. From the beginning.
Yeah, that looks like Columbus, Ohio.
That look like Columbus, Ohio now? Thanks, guys. I told you it was going to be operator error. Eliza, share with us your wisdom, not my skills.
Yes, so I had beautiful Columbus, Ohio. It's the 14th largest city.
Post-COVID, Columbus is looking pretty good. The city's expected to double by 2050, but that will likely be a lot sooner. It's currently the fourth hottest housing market, with houses selling with an average of 14 days on the market. With students returning to Columbus, there's about 50 colleges and universities, so businesses have had a lot more revenue and have been able to recover from that. Unemployment rates are back to pre-COVID levels at 3.3%, and it's been a steady decrease over the past few months, as you can see in the graph there. It's an estimate that 39% of workers could work remotely. It's likely that that's a much larger number, and more people will go remote in the next few years. And it looks like Columbus will continue to recover from COVID and grow. So thank you.
Thanks, Eliza. Off to the Northeast, Boston.
Evening, everyone. So I had Boston, Massachusetts as my city. The next slide. So as of right now, all restrictions are lifted in Boston. Some areas are still subject to the federal mandate, like public transportation, healthcare areas. As for the economy, Boston has rolled out a lot of small business relief funds. So they have a relief grant, which is up to $10,000 for outstanding debts, which include rent or mortgage, inventory, payroll. And then they also have a growth grant, which is also up to $10,000 for general business growth, things like materials and personnel, tools and technology. And a lot of politicians in Boston have described the economy as roaring back from the pandemic.
Sounds like technology at his end, I'm assuming, sound issues. So why don't we queue up Milwaukee with Mr. Morrissey.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Welki. So to start off with, Milwaukee is one of the top poor cities in the country. Historically, it's one of the most segregated. And then ever since its founding, it has been one of the most heavily industrialized cities in the country. So going off of COVID effects, obviously COVID had about almost 275,000 cases with about 2,500 deaths in total. So the industry saw about 6.7 million in loss with workers staying at home, obviously couldn't work in the industry, and ended up losing about a couple million within the first couple months that the city's still trying to recover from. So economic factors, unemployment rate in March of 2020 saw the unemployment rate jump up to about 15%, but since then it's settled at about 3 to 4% ever since about mid-February of this year. And then job growth, looking forward to the future, in the next decade, it's expected to be about 28.5% job growth, which is well below the national average of 33.5%. But Milwaukee's still recovering from the pandemic, and the economy is looking much better since March of 2020. So thank you.
Thanks, Connor. Next should be Mr. Glazer, and we're going to be looking at Washington, D.C.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Welki. So next slide. And Washington, D.C. is considered a company town, meaning about 40% of the employment population works for the federal government. And this actually has a negative effect as Washington is more of a highly urbanized area, missing out on any manufacturing revenues. And so with COVID, about 50,000 people had lost their jobs and revenues decreased by 61%. And then as a way to combat that, the government promoted streeteries, which is restaurants being able to deliver to-go food and drink. And it generated about $155 million in grant money. And that picture there is the infamous U Street in Washington, D.C. was once considered the murder capital of the world. And there's been a trend within the federal government to kind of rehabilitate these rundown areas. And it's kind of been a contrasting, I guess, trend since COVID to kind of bring people closer into the city rather than move out to the suburbs. Thank you.
Thanks, Landon. Kristen Jessberger will be next, telling us about Detroit.
Hi, everyone. So I researched Detroit, Michigan, and just looking at the state of Michigan overall, it's seen a large decrease in GDP at about 41%, which is even greater than the entire US average of 32.9%. A lot of this is due to large unemployment rates. And if we could go back a slide really fast.
I don't know.
Not sure if that's possible.
We'll just let you continue to talk if you could.
Okay, yeah. So the unemployment rates have increased greatly during the pandemic. They reached a high of about 48% in July of 2020, and they've stayed pretty consistent at about 20% since. They're not expected to recover until 2024. So then due to this unemployment, they've also come across some financial troubles. The municipal income tax is about 30% of the general fund's revenue. So they've seen a statewide reduction of 103 million in taxes. A lot of this resulting from the unemployment again. 64 million can be attributed to a reduction in Detroit's income taxes specifically. And this state has had to set aside $3 million for non-resident commuter payouts for work that was done outside of the city during the pandemic when people were working from home. I will note, though, that the recent passing of the American Rescue Plan has designated $11 billion to go to the state of Michigan from the federal government, and $826 million of this will be going to Detroit. So hopefully this will help to offset some of these COVID-19 related financial problems. So over the next couple of years, we can expect this city to mostly just be recovering from the unemployment and decrease in GDP during the pandemic.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
So let's really experiment here. And let's see if we can go back to catch Mr. Shaw. Which one do we want? Screen share. And we want, he was out west. And Tucson, let's go back. Are we on your screen or no, guys?
Yep, I've got it, Dr. Welki. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
So in the city of Sacramento, about 50 to 70% of people are still working remotely. And so this is decreasing congestion and pollution in the downtown area because people aren't driving to work. And what that's doing is that is increasing the quality of life for people in the downtown areas. The government is the largest employer in Sacramento, so it's definitely an essential industry, given that Sacramento is the capital of the state of California. Other essential industries in Sacramento include education, health and business services, as well as the construction industry. And then to move on to some demographic trends that we'll see in Sacramento post-COVID is in anticipation of a more diverse population. Sacramento is already very racially diverse, but is going to expect to see an increase in Hispanic and Asian people. In addition, Sacramento's population is expected to become a larger share of people being older, over 65 years old, and both of these effects, the effect of both of these observations will be a higher demand for multifamily housing that Sacramento doesn't currently have, so it'll be something to watch out for.
Thanks, Aaron. Let's see if we can. We're going to look for the South and see if we can take care of Mr. Hernan. You out there, Owen?
Yep.
I'll let you have it.
Awesome. So El Paso, Texas is the 22nd largest city in the United States. It's most notably known for the 300 days of sun that it gets per year, as well as sharing a southern border with Mexico. So the post-COVID outlook, the population has increased since the pandemic started year after year. This is following a 3-year decline that happened prior to COVID happening. And this is basically resulting from people moving from either retiring or deciding that they can work wherever they want from remote jobs. So they're seeing a large population increase there. This population increase has also caused the housing prices to rise from $167,000 to around $220,000 per house. They also have reopened the border, which has helped increase the immigration that they've experienced thus far and helped to resolve supply chain issues. The city of El Paso additionally donates $2 million to the border every year so that they can pay overtime for the Border Patrol agents to better resolve the supply chain issues. So since the pandemic has been over, the unemployment rate has dropped under 5%, and they have established the El Paso Recovery Fund, which is helping 245 families achieve some economic prosperity via an initial upfront payment of $1,200 and then monthly payments thereafter. So thank you.
Thanks, Owen. Okay. I think that concludes everybody except one last one. We have the city of Baltimore, which is Mr. Oakley.
I am up. Thank you very much. So my city was Baltimore. In 1970, it was the 7th largest city. And now today it's dropped to the 31st largest city. So it's seen quite a decline in population. So just to give a COVID relief and outlook, they have a $55 million investment, 30 of which going to disadvantaged job seekers, 25 of which going to nonprofits and small businesses. So this is a cool investment because it's trying to get the economic outlook of right now back on track to, improve the city as a whole. And then the second one I think is really important as well. It's called Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine. And it focuses on the Baltimore City School District, which has seen quite a few challenges throughout the past years. It's trying to just turn these challenges into some opportunities for both the students and and community. So the economic outlook, back in the height of the pandemic, the unemployment rate reached 12.6%. And now today it's currently at around 5.8%. So it's seen quite a big improvement. And there's also an inexpensive housing market in the suburbs, which if remote work is seen to have a stick around in the near future, there might see an influx of residents moving to the suburbs of Baltimore. And then the vaccination rate's currently around 81%, which is impacting kind of the whole city as a whole, because people are getting out in the city more and doing fun things like going to the Orioles game. And one thing I mentioned in a couple other presentations is that the Orioles attendance this year is a lot higher than past years, which can be seen as quite a big improvement as the city is wanting to get out and do more things. So thank you all very much.
That sort of is the potpourri of visits around various parts of the United States. I want to thank everybody for bearing with my technology limitations. It was an afternoon of cut and paste trying to put some stuff together. I learned a lot of things in the process that'll make the next show that we do like this much smoother. But I guess, Eric, we'll put you on to see where we want to go next. Were there questions from the audience?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you all again so much for being with us. I found that incredibly fascinating, and really, you all did a really, really nice job. So for anyone who's on as a participant, go ahead. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We do have one from Ken Sislak, class of 74. And his question is, what is the long-term impact of remote working on demand for downtown office space, public transit, and highway expansion? So if any of you all have insights into that question, and I have a couple questions that kind of percolate in my mind as well. So would love to know your thoughts.
Anybody in the audience want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, so I can touch on the portion about the long-term impact of remote working on the demand for downtown office space. We talked about this a lot in class about how we're expecting to see a lot more of a dissolution from that central business district. And a huge part of that is that downtown office space, and not only the office space itself, but also what it's going to do to the surrounding businesses. We talked a lot about retailers such as like Macy's or whatnot, and as well as food industry. So Starbucks and all those places that individuals would normally go to get a coffee, now that they're not going to have that traffic flow, and it's really going to affect the district as a whole. And it's not just going to decrease the value of those downtown office spaces, but there will also be ramifications in general for that whole central business district, as well with the congestion. The public transit, that's actually one thing that should improve with the decreased traffic into the city. And so I guess if there was a positive to come out of that, it would be the shorter trips to the downtown.
Thanks, Bricker. I think it's going to be a fascinating tension between sort of in-person versus remote, because I think downtown organizations are going to struggle as to how do they build culture with a totally remote workforce should it come about. And so from that standpoint, I can easily imagine that the nature of downtown is going to be different in terms of size of space, because it may not be a 5-day downtown work experience. It may only be a 3-day downtown work experience or a 2-day downtown work experience, which will have its own sort of ramifications as to how much space they need. It may be that some places go to a model where they have open spaces that, depending upon days, different parts of their workforce are downtown, and other parts use that same workspace on different days. But this is all going to be played out over time as organizations, I think, try to reimagine how they build whatever their culture happens to be.
Thank you. One of the questions that I kind of had was super early on when we started talking about Seattle. And for anyone who knows Seattle, clearly the housing market is incredibly hot. But I think we've seen housing prices go up everywhere. So what are local communities doing to help the lower socioeconomic communities cope with the realities of increased living or cost of living?
I think a number of you, I won't handle it, but I think a number of you had threads involving affordable housing. So for those that might have at various points, it'd be nice if you shared what your city's doing. I seem to remember a little bit in the Fresno area, if not others.
I could touch on a little bit about Seattle.
Thanks, Connor.
So Seattle's definitely, again, I brought it up in my slides, facing that issue. So a lot of the mandates that have started to come out from city planning is mandating that housing districts and apartments have a specific number of units that are dedicated towards affordable housing. And if they do not have that or do not meet the requirements, they're required to pay into a fund that goes directly towards subsidizing that. So there's definitely an increased conscientiousness on how this is going to be impacting them and trying to alleviate the pressure that the lower income community is facing as a result.
And just to touch on Fresno a little as well, with a lot of the money the governments have been receiving as relief money from COVID, in the different panels they've been having with their community members, they have been really voicing that concern for affordable housing. So I think a lot of the community members too are urging the officials to allocate that money appropriately to help with the affordable housing crisis.
So something I want to add is I work in commercial real estate in Columbus, and I just got an email last week actually that the city of Columbus is starting to add rent control, and that's a petition that's going to try to go through, and it seems like it's starting to get legs, and the guy I work with said it's definitely going to happen. So that's something the city of Columbus is going to do, because rent has just skyrocketed past couple of years as housing has gone up too. So rent control is something that we might see in other big areas.
Thanks, Richie. Another chat or did anybody else want to chime in on the issues related to downtown space or affordable housing? Because there was a different thread came in through the chat, and I'll open that up for the audience. So the question
on El Paso real quick with their affordable housing.
Sure.
It's been one thing that they've done pretty well even since the 1970s, since they are such a large immigration city, especially coming from Mexico. There's a lot of people that come back and forth over the border every day. And then the people who do stay over are located mostly in these affordable housing sectors. So it's something that they didn't really struggle with too much coming out of the pandemic because they had a lot of availability in the first place.
Thanks, Owen. So this is more of a quality of life issue. One of the questions that came in was a question through the chat that was speaking to issues related to changes in crime rates that people might have noticed. So I know when we did our quality of life podcast, a number of people commented on what was happening with crime in their particular cities. And so I guess I'd be interested in hearing some of the voices at the moment in the audience.
Yeah, I can start it off. I know in Baltimore, their quality of life rating was relatively high. However, their safety was the most deteriorating portion, just because they've got high poverty, which leads to high violence and crime. So I think it said on the U.S. Best News ranking, whatever that ranking is, they were the number 12th most dangerous city in the U.S. So that kind of just brings their quality of life rating down by a whole lot. And if you put it in terms of like A through F grading scale, they were a D+ ranking. So just not the best. And you can see how much that safety rating affects how much people really want to live in the city. So I think it's important because it's a big contributor to their overall quality of life.
Thanks, Adam.
I can continue with the crime rates. So Charlotte at least has been on a 16-year decline in crime rates. However, I was able to see a shift in what crimes were kind of growing, because obviously like the overall crime index has decreased, but some types of crimes under that umbrella have changed. So vehicle thefts, vehicle break-ins, and sexual assault cases involving a non-stranger are three primary crimes that have actually grown in the last 2 years within Charlotte. However, homicides and property crimes have both gone down significantly in the last 2 years. I just thought that was something that was kind of interesting to observe, is just like the shift of crimes that were kind of happening more as opposed to less in the last 2 years.
Thanks, Brett.
Something I thought was interesting with my city, Denver, was I saw that the crime rate had reached an all-time low in 2020 because people were quarantining and not going out. You're not going downtown on Saturdays. But since the restrictions have lifted, there's been an 8.8% increase in crime rates in Denver specifically.
And then another part of this, or the overarching project that we did, and throughout the semester, we all focused on individual sort of areas. Like I know that we did quality of life, poverty, housing. And one of the interesting things about Jacksonville, in my opinion, and something that I read, and we looked at it from 1970 up until 2020 to see the change in overtime. That was part of the overarching theme of what we did. And property crimes in Jacksonville went up slightly, but the violent crimes went from around 30,000 in 1970. And then in 2020, they had 81,000 violent crimes, or around that number. And it's actually coined as Florida's gun murder capital. But that being said, it's surprising to see that still people are coming to the region. They're investing a lot in downtown and nightlife, the beaches, maintaining those. So surprisingly, while they have that name, the gun murder capital, and that's in violent crime that runs rampant there, people are still coming to the city, and it seems as though it's a beautiful place to live. And again, based on my research as well.
Thanks, Cam. Eric, other questions that you might have had?
Yeah, the last question, and we'll leave it at this one. It seemed like some of the middle-sized cities were having a quicker recovery than some of the larger cities. Any rationale as to why that might be?
Just to give context also, when we organized the cities that we were going to look at, I automatically chopped off the heavily populated kinds of areas. So for example, we hear about the New Yorks, we hear about the Chicagos, we hear about those guys. So we intentionally focused on cities like 10 through 40 in the population metrics. And so from that standpoint, but I think there's something to be said that one of the themes that we looked at in the context of the class is sort of this tension that cities have between right size versus too big. And sometimes they become almost ungovernable by the size of the institutions and the infrastructures that they have to change. We've seen a lot of challenges when we looked at the cities, and we talked about, I mean, probably our most depressing class all year was when we talked about urban education systems and the challenges they face, and looking at what the mayor or whatever the governing body has at their disposal to change it, when so many of the challenges were challenges that they had absolutely no control over. So in that sense, there might be a little bit more nimbleness to some of the smaller cities in terms of how they govern. They might have the ability to be a little bit more innovative in the kinds of things that they try. So if you were to go back and look at Raleigh with its plan for education many years ago, created integrated school systems where other cities of larger sizes just couldn't find a way to break the culture that had existed to create some of the challenges. But I'd be interested to hear if any of the young experts in the field have anything they want to offer.
I think Connor had his hand up.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. So one of the things that we also studied and looked at was how the movement of people has been heavily focused on moving from more urban to rural situations. As COVID has gone on, they've started to see a change or an enactment on preferences. So I think that that same sentiment of moving to a less populated area can also be said the same for moving to different cities. So I know that a lot of the smaller cities have seen an increase in the amount of people moving there. They've seen a lot of turnover in the housing market. It's very hot there. So I think people are moving to the smaller cities. And when you have more people showing up, more people contributing to the economy there, there's a better ability to rebound at a faster rate than the cities that are a bit larger and are potentially losing people as a result.
Thanks.
I think another variable that we started to look at a little bit, or just alluded to a couple times in class, is what industries the city was based off of and how their response to the pandemic kind of related to that. So like more industrial based cities, how did they respond different to more like financial sectors, such as Charlotte, how they're rebounding pretty well because they're able to work remote, whereas some industrial cities, maybe more like Baltimore or cities in that case that have had rougher times coming back. I think there's some correlation to, or at least some relation to how, like what industry that city's based off of or rooted in.
Thanks, Brett. It's all yours, Eric.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being with us tonight. That sound the entire semester sounded like an amazing experience in learning about, you know, our wonderful American cities, the challenges that COVID had brought to them, but also exacerbated some, and then the opportunities that they all have coming out of COVID through a variety of different relief packages or just forward thinking. So thank you all so much for being with us. Andy, again, thank you so much for always being a wonderful partner as we look to engage our alums, our faculty, and our students with our programming. So thank you so much. Before we conclude this evening, I want to share a few other opportunities for you all to take advantage of this spring through the Office of Alumni Relations. On Tuesday, May 17th, Esther Salata from the John Carroll class of 2013 will share how her John Carroll journey influenced her entrepreneurial enterprises in the pest control industry. She and her husband, also a JCU grad, launched BeneSafe Solutions, a pioneering pest control that is pet, people, and environmentally safe. On Wednesday, May 25th, Dr. Nancy Stella, PhD and PSYD from the class of 1980, shows us that fear is normal and that fear does not need to control us, as she shares her book, Fear Traps. If you're feeling trapped in a cycle of coping mechanisms that just keeps making things worse, there's a way out, and Dr. Stella will share a few tips. On Thursday, May 26th, Cleveland Cultural Gardens board member and author Dan Hansen will share the unique history, heritage, and art of the gardens and discuss his book, Murder in the Cultural Gardens, a riveting whodunit which takes place in this historic setting. This program will take place at John Carroll. And finally, the weekend of June 10th through the 12th will be a busy one for the university. On Friday, June 10th, join fellow alumni and friends at Sleepy Hollow Golf Course for the annual Alumni Golf Classic, benefiting the Father Lavelle Cleveland Chapter Scholarship. That evening, John Carroll welcomes back alumni from the classes ending in 2s and 7s for alumni reunion. This is a time-honored tradition allowing alumni to rekindle their friendships and strengthen their bonds back to their alma mater. And finally, on June 12th, join fellow alumni at Progressive Field as the Guardians take on the Oakland Athletics. You can find more information about these programs and register for all of our upcoming programs at jcu.edu/alumni. Additionally, we invite you to view recordings of our previous programs on the John Carroll Alumni Association YouTube channel. To view our extensive library, search John Carroll University Alumni on YouTube. And finally, please consider a charitable gift to John Carroll in support of our wonderful students, our outstanding faculty, and our entire campus community. If you've already made a gift this year, thank you so much for your generosity. If you have not done so, please join me in supporting John Carroll, that we can continue to deliver an outstanding education for our current and future Blue Streaks. You can make a donation by visiting jcu.edu/give. Thank you all again for joining us this evening. Take care, be well, stay safe, and onward on John Carroll.